Hello and welcome to today's video where we are going to be talking about empathy and learning how to understand and empathize with the perspectives of others who are not us, and how we can do this in a way where we are first learning how to have compassion for other people and their perspectives, and understanding that everyone is not just us making shitty decisions, because a lot of us walk around judging other people for how their lives look, what they're doing, how they're behaving, all of these things. And we are projecting our own experience onto them. We are projecting our own understanding, our own skills, our own things that we have access to onto them. And we're just looking at other people as though they are just another version of us who are making shitty decisions and making shitty choices and doing the wrong thing, versus being able to understand that other people are living other lives that have nothing to do with us, that they are coming from a different place than us, that they have different access, different resources, different experiences, different perspectives than we do. And that understanding that is the key to understanding why people do the things that they do, why they are behaving the way that they're behaving, why they believe the things that they believe, why they don't believe the things they don't believe. And this can then help us to expand our own perspective, which is really helpful and healthy for a lot of us. It can help us level with people and communicate with people in a different way, in a better way, in a more productive way that makes this world a better place. And then the added layer of this, the second part of this, is learning how to see other people as being different from us, so that we can use that empathy in a way that we can say, okay, now I understand why they're judging me the way that they're judging me. I understand why they're speaking to me the way they're speaking to me. I understand why they are expecting the things that they're expecting from me, and why I shouldn't take their opinion seriously, why I shouldn't use them as a source of authority, why I shouldn't look to them for understanding and wisdom and advice. Because, again, a lot of us are forgetting that people can be wrong. And when we're really empathetic, and when we're really the kind of person who would identify as being empathic, this often comes with a tendency to over-validate the perspectives of others, to over-validate the opinions of others, to over-validate the rightness of others, and to see it from their perspective and to understand them the way that they are and why they see things the way that they see things, to a degree that we are then writing ourselves off, right? And it's because we're not fully understanding their perspective. We're getting into, again, kind of seeing them as ourselves and thinking, like, I would never say something like that to someone else unless it was true. I would never do this or that unless it was real. So if someone is doing that to me, it must also be coming from a place of understanding or truth, or them knowing me on some level, or having some awareness that I don't have. Because we're not actually empathizing with the person who is judging us or shaming us or criticizing us. We're projecting our own understanding onto them and then validating their perspective from our point of knowledge versus from their point of knowledge. And so sometimes when we become empathetic with other people, this doesn't mean that we actually take their opinion more seriously. It doesn't mean that we agree with them. It doesn't mean that when we empathize with someone's perspective and we understand it, that we are then saying that it's true or that it's valid or that it's real. And sometimes when we do our empathy work correctly, we can go, oh, okay, I empathize with why you would be that way, why you would say these things. And it's not actually about me. It's not really even, right? It's not true about me. It's not why you're doing what you're doing isn't about me. Why you're behaving the way you're behaving isn't about me. I can de-center myself and center the opinion of the perspective of someone else in a way that actually sets me free from feeling like everything is about me, or everyone who judges me is right about me, or if someone disapproves of me, that must mean that I'm actually doing something wrong. When we learn to have healthy empathy, it's also going to help us have healthy boundaries. That is one of the kind of paradoxes of true healthy empathy, is that it's going to help us see people as human, not as gods who have everything figured out, and not as people who have all the same information as us, the same awareness, the same perspective, and are just right about everything and we're wrong about everything. Okay? So that's what we're going to talk about today. What does actual healthy empathy look like? And how can we use this paradox of really understanding that other people are not us, that other people are not walking in our shoes, that other people have their own lives and their own experiences, that everything is not about us, so that we can see where we should take people's perspectives seriously, so we can see where maybe other people's perspectives could enhance our own, where we can see how to communicate with people in a better, more reasonable way. This is especially helpful in our personal relationships, not necessarily about arguing on the internet with people who have ideas that don't match ours, but with people who are actually in our lives. Healthy empathy. And then where that healthy empathy can then help us have healthy boundaries, because we start to understand where people are actually coming from and where we can say, okay, actually your opinion doesn't matter, or it's not true, or I shouldn't take your criticism seriously because I can empathize with your perspective and where you're coming from and why you're saying these things, and it's not legit. Okay? Okay. So first things first. Everyone is not you. This is I think the thing that all of us, pretty much, need to recognize and realize way more in our lives if we're going to have peace. If we're going to be able to understand other people, if we're going to be able to communicate in relationships, if we're going to be able to set healthy boundaries, if we're going to be able to have compassion for other people and their perspectives, the very first thing we really need to start to practice as human beings is the ability to see that other people have a completely different life experience than we do, have a completely different perspective on life than we do, have a completely different set of just ideas, perspectives, perceptions, things that they've been through, things that they have access to, things they don't have access to, knowledge and wisdom they have access to, knowledge and wisdom they don't have access to, and they are not you. Most of us are walking around expecting ourselves from everyone around us because we are not able to recognize our own perceptions and our own filters and our own experience, and how that has led us to seeing the world in a certain way, to judging things in a certain way, to doing things in a certain way. We are not self-aware enough to know where our experience and our perspective ends, and where it's not just shared common knowledge or shared common experience or this is what everyone thinks, or everyone believes, or everyone has access to. And so we project ourselves onto everyone else. And we do it without realizing it. And then that is usually when we get into a state where we judge others as being stupid, as being incapable, as being lazy, as being all of these things, because we're projecting our own experience onto them. Okay, so like perfect example of this in the self-help, spirituality, wellness world, which is where I think most people who watch my videos are coming from, right? In the self-help, spirituality, and wellness world, we have a lot of teachers, a lot of speakers, people who write books, who come from a place of unrecognized privilege. They are not seeing the leg up they have had in society and in culture that has given them the capacity to make the choices that they've made that made their life great. Okay? We have a lot of self-help, spirituality, and personal growth people who are out there, who are sharing their stories of, facing adversity and facing struggle and facing hardship, and who are sharing from their place of vulnerability, and that is great, right? And it's not to say that everyone in the self-help world is somehow just like magically privileged and they don't know what they're talking about and whatever. Nor is this to say that personal choice doesn't matter, okay? Because I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that a lot of people in the self-help, spirituality, and personal growth world are still operating under the false assumption that our culture pushes on us 24/7, that we all have the same 24 hours in a day, that we all have the same access to resources, we all have the same access to information, and that our choices all have the same power behind them. And therefore, the people who are succeeding because they're doing the right things. The people who are healing, the people who heal their bodies, the people who heal their mindsets, the people that make all the money, the people that, become famous artists or famous dancers or famous whatever, the people who are in the wellness world who healed themselves of whatever their thing was, that these people are just like you. That these people are living lives that are just like you. They have the exact same experience as you, because remember, they've told you about their struggles, they've told you about their harm, they've told you about their trauma, and you resonate with that. And then they told you about the choices that they made that, and again, whether or not they're actually even telling the truth is a whole nother video, but say that they are. They're telling you the truth about the choices that they made that made their lives better. And they are projecting that onto everybody, right? So we have a lot of, just for example, able-bodied, financially resourced, educated, were technically supported through their whole life, white males who are standing up there and saying, you just need to exercise, you just need to do your cold plunges, you just need to eat in this specific way, you just need to have this kind of mindset, you need to grind in this capacity, and you can have healing, success, growth, whatever. We have all the spiritual girlies, right? The wellness women who tell you if you just embrace your feminine and go into your softness and be the trad wife or whatever, you're going to be rescued from the harms of capitalism because some guy is going to come and save you. Or you're going to empower yourself with a business, and then your business is the thing that heals all your trauma. We have people who say that they healed their trauma by doing Kundalini yoga or doing this therapy technique or this or that. And they're saying this should work for everybody because it worked for me. This should be the thing that if you try it and you do it right, it will erase all your pain. It will lead to success because look at me. Look at my life. Look at my experience. It worked for me. So therefore it should work for you. And then on top of that, if it doesn't work for you, if you find that you try the thing that they're telling you to try, you do the thing they're telling you to do, and it doesn't work for you, the underlying message there is always, you did it wrong. You didn't do it hard enough. You didn't do it good enough. You need to pay me for the next level. You need to pay me for the next masterclass. There's another tool to come or whatever. But it's your fault, right? And we're not seeing that this is culture. This is mainstream culture. This is not spirituality. This is not wellness. This is not actual healing talk. This is mainstream capitalist culture seeping into everything. Which is if you just try hard enough, make all the right choices, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, everyone has the same opportunities and the same capacity. And if it doesn't work for you, you just suck. That is where we need to develop the capacity to say, wait a minute, that person is not me. That person who is in the spirituality, personal growth, wellness world, who's selling me this secret to success, to healing, to whatever. We need to be realistic about having actual empathy for the person who's speaking. Meaning we need to recognize if I, like for instance, myself, right? I am a chronically ill, neurodiverse woman who experienced a lot of CPTSD. If I'm going to Tony Robbins for advice on how to heal my life, and he's giving me all these tools that work for the other able-bodied, moneyed, privileged men in the world, there's a good chance that if doing his techniques don't work for me, it's not because I failed and didn't do good enough. It's because I'm operating under a completely different set of circumstances than he is. I'm operating under a completely different set of circumstances than the people in his circle. And this is the other thing, is that we need to recognize that a lot of the time, the experience that people have with their education levels, their financial status, their health status, their mental status, all of these things. Most of us grow up and then live our entire lives surrounded by people who are generally like us. You grow up in a certain way, right? The studies have shown that most people don't move more than 100 miles away from where they were born. And we have to recognize that we live in a very classist, segregated society. So people like Tony Robbins, people like Gabrielle Bernstein, they're hanging out with other rich, able-bodied, well-off people. Their experience of what it was like to face challenge, to try tools, and to heal themselves are tools that are generally going to work for them and the people they're around. And what most of us fail to recognize is that we are living in a bubble of people who are relatively like us. But that does not mean that everyone is like that. That does not mean that the whole world is like that. That's what our world looks like. So again, most people are walking around with an extreme lack of empathy for the incredibly diverse amount of life experiences that are happening on this planet. What's going to work for Tony Robbins is not going to work, generally speaking, for the single mom who was never educated, who has 5 kids at home, who has to take 2 buses to get to work, and who has a chronic illness. It's just not reasonable to assume that the tools that are working for the Tony Robbins crew is going to work for someone who's experiencing life in a way that's so different from them. So when we are taking advice from people, when we are looking at the people to follow, we first want to look for if they're just speaking from personal experience. If they're just speaking from, this is what I have gone through, this is my story, these are the things that help me, we want to be really realistic in looking at what were their circumstances like. What is their mindset like? What was their childhood like? What was their upbringing like? What was their education like? Who are the people that they're surrounded by? What's their bubble that they live in? And how is it different from mine? That is such a key thing that we need to recognize. This person is not me. They might have a story that hooks me in, and their story reminds me of myself, and I can resonate with parts of it, and that's great. But that does not then mean that they are you, and that everything that they offer is going to help you or applies to you. Their perspective is based on their life experience, which may be very different from yours. The tools that worked for them within the context of their life experience. And if their life experience is very different from yours, those tools may not work for you. Because they are not you. They are not operating in the same bubble that you are operating in. They are not living from the same amount of choice that you are operating from. And so it's not to say we have to look for people who are exactly like us. But it is to say that we want to moderate our expectation of what is and isn't going to work for us based on the things that people are saying, especially if it's anecdotal, based on how different is my experience from theirs. And then the second thing is if their advice isn't necessarily anecdotal, right? If they're not centering their own story, but they're saying, these are the tools that I'm offering. Again, we want to look to who is the demographic that they're speaking to. And do I fit into that demographic? Are they speaking in terms of people who have wealth versus people who don't? People who are surrounded by a supportive community versus people who are very isolated? Are they talking to people who have this kind of mindset or this kind of education? And then again, using our tools of empathy, using our tools of that person is not me and they are speaking from a different perspective, to say, where do I want to take their perspective and their understanding and their viewpoint and use it to enrich my own? Because this is the beautiful thing about the internet now, is that part of what it's done for us is it's given us the ability to step outside of our bubbles. Because like I was talking about, right? We live in a society that is still very segregated. You are generally going to spend time with, for most of your life, people who are in the same economic bubble that you're in, the same education bubble that you're in, the same ableness that you have. And that can be very limiting for us, right? That can be very limiting when everyone we know lives the way that we live, if the way that we're living isn't working for us. So sometimes the best thing we can do is listen to people who have different perspectives than us, who are from different bubbles than us, who think differently than we do and have different viewpoints. But again, being able to validate and witness that is so important. Right? Someone who grew up financially supported is just going to have a completely different perspective on their capacity, on how safe the world is, on what they need in order to be safe, on what kind of risks they can take to get better, to do better, than people who grew up in a situation where they weren't financially stable. The people who grew up with secure connections are going to have a totally different time working through relationship troubles and traumas than the people who grew up in insecure relationships. So again, are the tools that are being offered coming from someone who can at least empathize with and share your perspective, your experience, what you have been through? Or are they projecting their own perspective, their own situation onto you or onto everybody and saying, these are the universal tools that work because they are the thing that work for me, and they're neglecting to understand that their experience is not the universal experience? That is so important when we are taking advice from anybody. Are they either able to empathize with your perspective if they don't share your perspective, right? Because there are a lot of things that I talk about that are not coming from my personal experience. I have had the privilege of working with a lot of people one-on-one and getting to know other people's stories and other people's perspectives and other people's lives, so I can offer tools and resources and guidance for people who are not like me. Right? Like if anyone wants to talk to me about health stuff, I'm not going to tell you what I eat in a day, because you probably don't have superior mesenteric artery syndrome, don't have a duodenum, you probably don't have mast cell activation syndrome, you probably don't have CPTSD, which totally affected your whole body. So what works for me isn't universal, because my perspective and my experience is not universal. The advice needs to be geared to you and your experience. So that's what we need to understand. We need to look for people who can speak to the actual experience we are living. And that requires that we empathize with the fact that they are not us. Before we take anyone's advice, we need to really take a step back and say, okay, is this person actually able to speak to my experience or not? Are they speaking to my experience or not? Or is it possible that the things that worked for them because of the bubble they live in, and it's working for the people around them because of they're around people who also live in that bubble. And so they have their generalized other that all look and sound and feel and act like them. And they're not understanding that that's not universal. Okay? And then with that, that is what we need in order to understand the people out there who we judge and shame and criticize. Is that at the end of the day, no matter how horrible, harmful, deplorable, unacceptable someone's behavior is, which is the reality for some people, okay? This is not to say, right? These are the lines of empathy. Learning to empathize with someone else's perspective. Learning to empathize that no one is evil, but rather they are working from their lived experience. They have a good reason for believing the things that they believe. They have a good reason for doing the things they do. Does not mean that we then agree with everybody. Does not mean that that erases the harm of someone's actions or words or the ways that they operate. Okay? Healthy empathy is not about erasing harm. It's not about saying everything is fine because everyone has a good reason for why they do what they do. It's about learning to see that people get to where they get for a reason. That people are not evil. Okay? They have their own experience. They have their own brain chemistry. They have their own physical chemistry. They have their own life experience. They have the way that they've been harmed and hurt in the past. They have the ways that they've been indoctrinated. Right? So we, especially in this politically more divisive than ever climate, it's so easy to look out and be like, these people are idiots for believing what they believe, for following who they follow, for voting for who they voted for. How is it that they do not see that they're being manipulated or that they're being used or that whatever it is? And that's because we're projecting our experience onto them. We're projecting our thought process onto them. We're projecting our resources onto them, our education onto them. And we're not empathizing with where they are coming from in their life. And all that's going to do is make us more frustrated. Okay? So really, again, taking a step back and realizing that everyone out there has a reason for why they got to where they got. Has a reason for believing what they believe. A reason for doing what they're doing. That doesn't make it okay. It doesn't make it right. It doesn't mean that we don't necessarily need to fight against things and be active against things and be opposing, setting boundaries, saying no, speaking out, educating. But we want to be more coming from a place of education. And I guess that this is the other thing too. Understanding that people are pretty much never going to change their opinion. They are never going to change their perspective. They are never going to come into a healthier way of being when they feel judged, attacked, shamed, and criticized. As justified as we might be in how right we are and how wrong they are. People change because they were empathized with. And then they were spoken to on their level. So if we really want to be positive influences in the world, if we actually want to see change, if we actually want to be the kind of people who can support others in shifting their perspective, we need to become the kind of people who can level with people. If we just want to be right and we just want to grandstand and we just want to feel justified in our perspective, we can do that. That's a legit thing. People do that all the time. But if we want to actually have a positive impact, we need to realize that the first step in changing anybody's opinion, the first step in helping to educate somebody, the first step in getting someone to see that they're operating in a bubble that's not healthy or not true or not in alignment with reality, is realizing that they aren't you. Realizing that they aren't you just making shitty choices. Realizing that they have a reason for why they are the way they are. Why they believe what they believe. Why they do what they do. Why they follow who they follow. And we take it on ourselves to understand that. To empathize with that. To see that as legitimate. And then to level with them on their level instead of expecting them to be on our level. That is what it takes to be someone who can communicate to someone who lives a very different life than you or has very different views than you. In order to actually make positive change, we have to be able to empathize with people, where people are coming from, before we try to attack or shift or change their minds or their perspectives. People need to feel validated because, again, at the end of the day, as hard as we might think we are as human beings, we want to be validated. We want to be seen. We want to be told that we're good. People just do not respond well to being told that they're evil or that they're wrong or being attacked and shamed for their perspectives. That's the best way to drive somebody deeper into their mindset. This is why when we're looking at people who are involved in cults and other kind of harmful groups, and we're looking at how can I be a good support for people coming out of these groups. And we're learning, right, that the technique is not to get in there and be like, look how wrong this is. Look how stupid this is. Look at all the flaws. Look at how bad this is. That's usually just going to scare people deeper into the cult. Rather, we need to be a safe place, a non-judgmental place, a place of, I'm not here to tell you how wrong and bad and stupid your thing was. I'm here to understand how you got sucked in. I'm here to empathize with the fact that you got sucked in. That it's not your fault. And I'm here to provide community and support and safety for you to transition. And this is the other big thing, right? Is that we are still living in a world right now where we're so antagonistic to people who are different from us that it's we're not understanding that we're emotional beings who want connection and community. So if you make someone feel horrible and stupid and evil for having their perspective, the chances of them letting that perspective go are slim to none because they're looking and saying, well, then I let go of my perspective so that I'm not connected to the people that I had before. And then I'm just going to be shamed and judged and guilted by the other side. I'm not going to be accepted. I'm going to be blacklisted. I'm going to be nitpicked. I'm going to be told that I was evil and wrong and bad. So why would I change? There's no safe place for me to go. So we need to recognize that we need to be a safe place for people to come. We can't be so perfectionistic. We can't be so, you have to agree with me on absolutely everything or you can't be part of the group. If you made a mistake even one time, you're horrible. The infighting And the perfectionism is the thing that's going to stop any progressive movement, because we make it impossible for the imperfect progress to happen when we're gatekeeping and trying to make everything perfect, and when we're judging everyone for their past ways of being or even the current harm they're causing, instead of just being able to empathize and give tools and resources for how to grow. Now, I want to shift. So that's what I have to say about like the kind of bigger societal empathy. Is learning to empathize with people who have other perspectives than us. Seeing that they aren't us. That they have a reason why they got to where they are. Validating that so we can understand how to level with them and make them feel seen and included, so that maybe they feel safe enough to expand their perspective, rather than thinking we're just going to shame, blame, and guilt people into being better, because it's not going to work. Okay? Now, when this comes to our personal relationships, this is where I think empathy is really applicable to most of us. Right? Is, again, learning how to see the people that we interact with on a daily basis. Our partners, our friends, our family members, our coworkers, as people who are separate from us. This is so important, especially if we are someone who's a people pleaser, who feels like we're constantly being rejected, who feels like we're constantly walking on eggshells around everyone and trying to perform and trying to... We all need to take a step back and recognize and realize that other people are living their own lives for their own sake. And that so much of the time, the ways that people behave, the ways that people even treat us or talk to us, are not because of us. It's not in response to our behavior or our way of being sometimes. That they are operating from their own filter, from their own understanding, their own emotional state, their own past experience. So when we're constantly like having an argument with somebody, one of the best things we can do is to take a step back and to be like, okay, where am I pushing my perspective onto this person? Where am I seeing this argument through my lens versus being able to see it through their lens? So for instance, let's think of an example. Like, for me, the house being clean and put together means something to me. Okay? As someone who grew up with a lot of chaos in my life, who's very autistic, who has a lot of complex CPTSD and all that stuff, having the house in a certain level of cleanliness and organization and dishes put away and all this stuff means security to me. That's my experience. That's my lens. That's my projection. Chaos in my environment often communicates to me chaos and lack of safety. So when there's a pile of dishes in the sink, I look at that and my nervous system goes, we're not safe. My husband, on the other hand, grew up in a totally safe environment. He was loved by his parents. he's able-bodied. He didn't have a lot of trauma, and he wasn't taught to even see these things. So he puts dishes in the sink, and to him it's just dishes in the sink. And for a long time in our marriage, it was like so much fighting about this. So much me just being like, what is wrong with you that you keep doing this? Because I was never able to explain to him what it meant to me, what my actual perspective was, what my experience was, why to me it's not just a dish. And I wasn't able to empathize with his perspective that he can be around a dish and it doesn't make his nervous system crawl. Right? And so for both of us, we had to learn to step into the other person's shoes, to find that middle way where I can learn to have a little bit less of a nitpicky, everything needs to be perfect, right? There was room for me to heal my nervous system and to see that a little bit of chaos can exist and I can still be okay. And there was room for him to learn to be tidier and to clean up more and to respect our space more. To take on a little bit more of my perspective of handling things and controlling the chaos and making the future self happy by doing things in the now, right? Because the dishes are going to have to get done. You may as well just do it now instead of waiting later, and then it just gets harder. So we had to learn from each other by empathizing with the other person's experience. It was always a fight when I just perceived, that was the other thing. I was perceiving him not doing the dishes as he doesn't care about me. He doesn't care about my nervous system. He doesn't care about creating an environment that feels safe for me. He just doesn't care about me. And for him, he was like, I'm showing her that I care about her in all these other ways. How is leaving a dish having anything to do with her? Right? To him, it was just, I just didn't clean a dish. To me, it was, he doesn't care about me. I was projecting myself onto him. Because from my perspective, I would never do that to someone else. Because that is something that's important to me. So from my perspective, the only reason I would leave a dish in the sink is if I didn't give a shit about somebody. If I didn't respect them. And I was projecting that onto him. That because that is what I would do, that must be why he's doing it. And he was like, what are you talking about? This has nothing to do with you. I just didn't want to clean the dish. You see what I'm saying? So in our personal relationships, it is so important for us to become aware of our narratives. For us to become aware of our experience. To us to become aware of what we are making things mean. Because so much of the time, the things that we argue about are not about the surface thing. It wasn't about the dish. It was about my need for order and to feel cared for. And that came from my perspective. And I was projecting my experience and my perspective and my feelings onto Marcus, who has a completely different experience, a completely different set of understandings. And then it was the same with other things in our life, right? There were things that I neglected to do for him because it didn't matter to me. That wasn't on my radar. But it was a huge deal to him. And he didn't know how to communicate that. And so he was just constantly feeling like I didn't care about him because I wasn't doing the things that meant something to him, because those are not things that mean anything to me. His perspective is not mine, and mine is not his. So that is another huge part of empathy. And then finally with that, again, learning how to say, this is not someone's perspective I need to take on. So this kind of ties back to what we were talking about in the beginning of the video. I have been on the internet right now doing this for a long time. And so I have been called every name. I have been told everything, right? And so much of the time, when people are saying mean things about me and judging me and criticizing me, and I've taken the time to actually interact with them, so much of it comes down to learning that they were projecting their own insecurities and their own experience onto me. And of course they were doing that, because at the end of the day, they don't actually know me. The story that they're telling themselves about why I am the way that I am has everything to do with them and their perspective and their lens, and essentially nothing to do with me, because they don't know me. This is why I would say, generally speaking, unless someone actually knows your circumstances, if they give you advice, they're projecting themselves onto you. I think that this is just a blanket statement that we can sort of make and follow. Unless someone actually knows you, unless they actually know your circumstances, unless they've taken time to question you about what you have gone through and what your experience is like, and they understand you, and then they are offering advice from that perspective, you can just assume they're talking to themselves through you. Because that is what most people are doing without even realizing it. They are seeing a version of themselves in you and saying, well, if I was in that position, this is clearly what I would do. Which may be the thing that they should do if they were in your position. But they're not in your position. They don't have the same circumstances that you have, right? They are not living in the same body you're living in, with the same financial status you're living in, with the same resources you have access to, the same education, the same location. They are projecting their experience onto you. And then this is the same thing when you go to offer advice to someone else. I really want you to stop and ask yourself, do I know this person's circumstances? Do I actually understand anything about their experience? Or am I just making all these assumptions based on what they look like and what I would assume is happening if that was happening to me? Everyone is not you. Everyone is not you. And then, like I was saying before with the interpersonal relationships, also understanding that when people say things to you or when they treat you in certain ways, so much of the time it has nothing to do with you. Even in our interpersonal relationships. So many of us are centering our own perspective and our own experience way too much. And if we're people pleasers, this is especially true. We're seeing ourselves as way more impactful and important and influential in other people and their behavior than we actually are. We're not empathizing with the fact that someone is separate from us, living their own reality, going through their own day, having their own thing. We're over assuming importance in other people's lives. So this is where real empathy sets us free. Is that we start to say, okay, that person is not me. That person is having their own life. And a lot of the things that they say and do and how they behave might have nothing to do with me. So now if they're stepping all over my boundaries and they're treating me like shit and all that stuff, of course say something. But we also have to remember that if we're like constantly like, are you mad at me? Do you not love me? Are you a lot of the time the answer to that is they're just not thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves. They're in their own experience. It's about them, it's not about you. Okay? Everyone is not you. Everyone is the way that they are for some reason. So if we're fighting and clashing, it is our job to first understand our own perspectives, to understand our own context, and to see that we are not everyone else. And then we do the work of learning to understand and validate and see other people's perspectives and how it isn't like ours. And then we can start to come to some understanding of how to move forward. That's always going to come from realizing that other people are not us. And that what people want is validation in their perspective, and then seeing if we can expand it from that safe place, both for ourselves and others. Okay? So real empathy is not about agreeing with everyone else or saying that everyone else's perspective is right and ours is wrong, or getting rid of our perspective. Right? It's about understanding so we can move forward in a productive way. Everyone is not you. You are not everyone. Your experience is your experience. So scrutinize your experience and see how it's different from others. And then the world is going to start to make a lot more sense. Okay? Okay. So that's all I have for today. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And I'll see you later.